I am from Ghana. We had no idea back in Ghana what Nkrumah's experience as a truly impoverished student for 10 years in this country. We had no idea the influence of him being an impoverished student in Jim Crow America of the 1930s. We had no idea that that experience was critical for what he eventually did in the Gold Coast. Unlike all new immigrants arriving from Europe, when they arrived in New York Harbor and saw the Statue of Liberty, they told themselves, we have arrived. For Nkrumah, it was the other way around. When he was leaving the United States in 1945, that is when he looked at the Statue of Liberty and said, Lady Liberty, I'm taking your message back to Africa. I'm going to kick the white man out. But he did it without racial animosity. You would hear two papers today about white folk who worked with him at the highest level. As Attorney General, Jeffrey Bain, he paid the ultimate price for it, Jeffrey Bain. Then there was his private secretary, Erica Powell, an Englishwoman who had the uncomfortable job of being the buffer between Kwame Nkrumah and the black people he was leading. Then there was June Mill, white woman from New Zealand, who served faithfully as his research assistant up to the very, very last minute, April 27, 1972. So, we are opening this conference to remind ourselves that yes, indeed, from the 1400s, when the Portuguese encountered the Kingdom of the Congo and established a diplomatic relationship between the Kingdom of the Congo and Portugal. Sometimes the mind boggles that in the 1400s, the King of the Congo had diplomatic representative at the court of the King of Spain. And the King of Spain, in the 1400s, had diplomatic representation in the Congo Kingdom. All that changed once Brazil was discovered and cheap labor was required. And it's been downhill from there. Some of our student speakers are not going to be with us here today. Oladapo Akindele, who was to speak on Nkrumah's first, his apprenticeship in politics began with the foundation of the African Students Association in the 1930s. He was the first president of the African Students Association in the 1930s. And it is that experience of melding together Africans who found themselves in the United States, that set him going. And it is significant what he did then, even with the African Students Association. There were the conservative Africans who insisted that the African Students Association would be open only to registered students. Nkrumah said, no, we have to open it to all Africans, because there are so many other Africans who are around who were in a position that he was, because when Nkrumah arrived at Lincoln University, he had $5 in his pocket. Yet, in 10 years, he had 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, completed the coursework for his doctoral dissertation in philosophy, and finished the draft of that philosophy before he left. 10 years, 10 years, 5 degrees. I just don't know how he did it. And there were times that he did not even have a place to sleep. The Philadelphia night train was his bedroom. You buy one, the train ticket for the night, sleep on the train, wake up in the morning, pick pieces of coal in the streets of Philadelphia, sell those pieces of coal to buy one meal and the train ticket. Yet, in spite of that, 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD were completed. It took me 8 years to finish my PhD. And Nkrumah did 5 degrees in 10 years. Well, that gives us a sense that this was an extraordinary man. But he was not without his faults. Great men become great, not because they are perfect, but because they became great in spite of the circumstances, of their circumstances. And Nkrumah's circumstances from birth till he became leader of government business in 1952 was nothing to write home about. He did not know his father. There is evidence now emerging that his father may not even have been Ghanaian. His father may have come from the Liberia. There were Liberians there who were all over the West African coast, who did the most menial of jobs. David Birmingham wrote the most recent biography of Nkrumah, in which he suggested that indeed Nkrumah's father may have been a night soil carrier. Well, let me explain what a night soil carrier is. There are no flush toilets in West Africa. So at night, it's somebody else's job to come and carry the excrement. Apparently that was what Nkrumah's father was. Yet, in spite of that, he rose through the ranks, despised by those Africans who went to Inns of Court in England and got their degrees in law. Despised, as Bill Clinton was despised here. But yet, in spite of all those odds, he achieved what he achieved. He is the only African president deposed that I know that had 3 funerals. The first funeral was in Conakry. And anybody who was somebody, including Fidel Castro, was at that funeral. Then there was this bizarre tussle between Sékou Touré in Guinea, who had his body, and the new government in Ghana, who 6 years after Nkrumah was overthrown, were already beginning to feel that the Ghanaian people were clamoring for this president. So we had this bizarre diplomatic incident in which Sékou Touré of Guinea is dictating to the government of Ghana the terms under which his body would be returned. And all his terms were met. He was buried in his hometown, in his home village. But his popularity in Ghana, even after his death, grew so much that his body had to be exhumed and reburied at the very spot on which he declared Ghana's independence on March 6, 1957. And on that day, he set the tone. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. And of course, that did not mean he forgot the diaspora. So at Ghana's independence, he made sure that anybody who was somebody in the burgeoning leadership of the civil rights movement was there. And it was there at Ghana's independence that the leadership of the United States civil rights movement had its first contact with the White House in the person of the leader of the official United States delegation, Richard Nixon. It was in Ghana. And in fact, I found this nowhere else than in the Chicago Defender, which reported on the the 7th of March, 1957. The writer, Ethel Payne, sometimes called the godmother of African-American journalism, wrote, "The independence celebration in Ghana as a sovereign state was equally meaningful to Americans, though conceivably in different ways. It was there that Reverend Martin Luther King, leader of the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott, met Vice President Nixon at a reception given by Prime Minister Nkrumah. Nixon, always quick on the trigger, wasted no time. He promptly and unhesitatingly invited the Reverend King to come to Washington and talk with him about the proposal that he, Nixon, visit the South. Thus, King, after weeks of imploring President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon to visit Alabama and speak out on behalf of desegregation, had to go all the way to West Africa to get a hearing. He proves, Ethel Payne writes, that a straight line is not always the shortest distance between 2 points. And I'll call on Undergraduate to read his research on the effect that Martin Luther King's presence in Ghana at Ghana's independence had on him, and the energy that it gave Martin Luther King to do what he did.